Okay, number 64. Mediumship. I went to see John Edward live last night at Anaheim, California. As always, please like this video, comment below, click the subscribe button. All those things help other people see these videos. Because of YouTube algorithms. The original title for this video was supposed to be the importance of practicing on non-mediums, but there was so much crossover between both subjects that I thought I'm just going to make one longer video about it. So before I get to the John Edwards specifics, I was talking about if you're a developing medium, it's really important to get practice on people who are not mediums. And in most practice circles, or development circles, everyone in there is also a medium. So I sit in a circle regularly. We meet every other week, and we have guest sitters who are normal, everyday people who know they are there to be practiced on. And I learned from that, for example, right away that when I know I've got somebody and the person in front of me keeps saying no, 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 I've learned to say, is there someone specific you're waiting to hear from? And they're like, yeah, every time they say yeah. And I'll tell them, okay, so this isn't that person, so let's let them say what they want and move on, and hopefully the next person we get will be the one that you really want. This is covered before we do the reading. It's in a handout that we give them. It's on my website. It still happens to me with clients, and it happened over and over again with John Edward last night. So it was very validating. That the whole evening was validating. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but that happened to him several times, and it's a thing, and it can throw you the no's. He didn't let the no's throw him, and I highly recommend you don't let the no's throw you, because especially if you're just practicing, it's practicing. So that was good. I think the biggest difference is, well, first of all, I want to say when that circle that I sit in first started to do guest sitters, because we were initially just practicing on each other, the first few weeks that we did that, I was still getting things for people in the group, as in a gallery reading, a public reading. And so, and we kind of made this rule where if that happened, we would just have to drop it, because it was always for the guest sitter. And so that stopped happening. Either because people in spirit know when I'm in that circle, I'm only there for the guest sitter, and or because I got better at focusing on one person as opposed to opening to the entire group that I was with. Anyway, so that was important. I think the biggest difference between guest sitters who are regular everyday people and also a public reading or an actual client is there is more grief involved, right? Some people go to mediums for the fun of it, some to debunk us. Mostly people are in some degree of grief. And so I took a class, and I recommend that you take a class on interacting with people in grief, dealing with people's grief, because if you were going to do mediumship for the public, you're definitely going to encounter a huge percentage of your clientele will be dealing with some kind of grief. And I think that needs to be respected, and it's something that you don't want to wing. You want some kind of formal training about that. It probably should be another video, its own video. Again, I have to reiterate, do not practice on the general public. That is a terrible idea unless they know that they are being practiced on. But if you have some talent for mediumship, you should not be charging anyone for a reading when mostly what you're doing is learning on them how to develop. I think that's a terrible idea. And the guest sitters that come to that circle that I sit in all know that they're there to be practiced on. I think more healing happens. Certainly there was a lot of healing last night at the John Edward event, and more healing happens when there's a real client. And so that's a big difference. In practice circles and development circles where everyone is a medium, most of us are there to practice our skills, to hone our skills, developing how we get information. We're not there so much for the healing. And so it's easy to, right, we're not there so much even to be recipients. We're more there, like I go to circles as a recipient to let people practice, because I have a lot of people in spirit, like 60-some people in spirit. But I'm not really there to receive messages. Sometimes I do when it's very moving, but the point of me going to these things is to develop myself. And so it's easy to lose sight of that when you're with a client or demming for an audience, they're there for healing. They're there for some kind of resolution or comfort, right? So I think that's easy to lose sight of. And so I think the last thing I'll say is if you are considering becoming a medium for the public, for strangers, it is a responsibility. Mediumship is a responsibility that can be great fun. It can be exciting and weird and fascinating and educational, but it is a responsibility because you are dealing with people in grief. And that's something to be really, really respectful about and handle gently. So that's my thought about that. So about John Edwards specifically. It was really good. It was about 400 people there. It was a big ballroom at the Doubletree Hotel, I think, in Anaheim. He looks and sounds exactly the same in person as he does on TV. This woman came out ahead of time to explain things like parking and the microphones and where the bathrooms were. She was quite funny. I think she was there. I don't know if she was trying to warm us up a little bit, but if you can be funny explaining about paying for parking, she did it. And it turned out she was his cousin. So she's real nice. Everybody there was nice. He did start right on time. It went from 7 to 9. He went past 9 o'clock, but he started right on time. But he didn't start reading immediately. He started with stories about previous events and problems that had gone wrong, like tech problems that had gone wrong in previous events. And then all of a sudden he started reading. It was almost, he didn't physically trip on stage, but it was almost as though he had tripped. And he just started reading suddenly. And even though he said, I know you all have your A-list, someone you really want to hear from, or a couple of people you really want to hear from, anyone can come through, blah, 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 and still all night long. I would say 40% of the people that he read were like, no, no, no. And he's like, okay, I'm not with the person you want. Let's let this person come through. It was super validating because that happens to me all the time. So that was neat. Before I give you more specifics about the evening, there's not much to say. He did reading after reading. I want to give you my own interesting, weird perceptions of what was going on that night. So first of all, I have to say he's absolutely the real deal. I didn't think anyone questioned that anymore, but someone I personally know accused him of being a fraud and how disappointed they were in him. But I was double linking unintentionally last night a couple of times. So he was reading this one family. And all of a sudden in my head, I heard this man's voice very clearly say, just tell them I'm sorry. And a beat later, John up on stage goes, he's apologizing. He's apologizing for something. And sure enough, that developed in the reading. It was very meaningful to them. So for sure, he's the real deal. But I've read online, when this friend of mine was accusing him of being a fraud, I Googled that and looked it up. And there's all kinds of stuff that I found about, when you go to these events, you have to fill out all these forms with detailed information, and they research you, and they're feeding him information in an earpiece. It's all bullcrap. None of that happened. It was nothing like that. There's my clock. So there was nothing like that. It was just like any normal reading with any medium, except that there were 400 people in the room. So definitely not a fraud. So I'll tell you 3 progressively weirder things. One weird thing that happened to me as a medium in that reading is, for some reason, I kept seeing around his face and around his hip dark purple flashes of light. That has happened to me before. I don't know what it means, but mostly when that happens to me, I'm looking at my husband and I'll see dark purple flashes around him. Or if I'm not looking at him, I will be looking at something and he's within close physical proximity and I'll see dark purple flashes. I don't know what that means, but that was happening last night. And then the second weird thing was that while he was standing stationary on stage, he got blurry. I don't know what to make of that because nothing else got blurry and it wasn't my contacts. He wasn't moving out of my range of focus. He was standing still and he got really blurry. And I thought, what is happening? Because nothing else was blurry around him, just he was getting blurry. So I did this thing and I'm looking and then he'd eventually snap into focus, and that happened twice. I don't know how to interpret that. I don't know what that was. It just happened. And the super weird thing that I hesitate to say, but I'm going to say it because it was my perception and that's why people are watching this video, is when I am reading for somebody, as a medium, I see people in the room with me, but I see them, the way you look at a room and repaint it in your head or rearrange the furniture, it's in my mind's eye. I'm not seeing them with my eyes, I'm seeing them in my mind's eye. So I'm looking at John that way. He's up on the stage and I could see coming out of his back stubby wings, as though he had had larger wings that were chopped off. I got the sense that they were healing or growing back. I have no idea how to interpret that. I don't know what that means. It's what I was perceiving most of the night. So that was super weird and unexpected. Oh, because the reason I did that is because I had heard him talk about in an interview and I read in one of his books that he has a spirit animal that's a wolf. He did talk about that last night, how even as a child he would see a wolf in his room that scared him, and then some shaman told him, oh, I see you walk with a wolf. And so I was kind of looking for the wolf. Didn't see anything like that, but I did see stubby little wings chopped off wings coming out of his back. I don't know what that means. So, like I said, it was a validating evening because he talked about either he was experiencing things that have happened to me in readings, like people doing the no, no, no thing, and then eventually saying, oh, yes, of course, how obvious, I'm so sorry. And then the whole audience would groan because this one couple, it felt like 18 minutes. It probably was not that long, but it was really long where they kept doing no, 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 and then finally realized what he was talking about. He called it themes in readings. I've talked about in some of my videos patterns in mediumship circles. So when he does smaller group sessions, there'll be a theme to it, like I've talked about patterns where everyone in my circle connected with someone who was a teacher or married to a teacher, and the same thing happens in his circles. Everyone who came through had died in some kind of accident, or everyone had passed, were murdered, or that kind of thing. The theme of last night in Anaheim, if there was one, was bananas. They kept coming up over and over again in different readings, so that was interesting. That kind of thing just happens. Interesting coincidences, because this happens in circles that I participate in, and it was happening last night. My friend and I happened to go with another medium. Well, we were both going. We both got tickets to the event, and we made sure we were going to meet up and try to sit next to each other. And I pulled into my parking space. I turned off my car, and this woman pulled up, and it was my friend. There were 400 people there just for that event, never mind what else was going on in the hotel that night, and we happened to park right next to each other. So the night started off coincidentally. It felt arranged. I don't know why it was arranged or what was happening, but it felt arranged. And then in the evening, the best coincidence that happened during the evening while he was reading people is there was this couple that was standing. He got really specific information for them, and then all of a sudden he said, where's Lawrence? I want to talk about Lawrence, which got my attention. And they both said, no, neither one of us understands that. And sitting right in front of them was this young woman who said, I live in Lawrence, Kansas. I go to school there. He said, did your dad, whatever? And she said, yeah. He's like, okay, I'm switching to you. And the guy who was still standing with the mic behind her said, I just want to say my mother, who you were just talking about, used to live in Lawrence, Kansas, and worked at a school there. So nice little coincidence, right? That they would happen to sit next to each other and have readings one after the other. It was neat. What else did I want to say? Oh, this is interesting. I didn't expect this. So maybe he does one-on-one readings more like I do, which is more how most mediums do it, which is you kind of stay with one communicator and you go more in depth with them. He didn't do that last night. Last night it was a lot of surface stuff about a lot of people. So he'd say mother-in-law or grandmother, mom's side of the family, this name, did this for a living, yes. And then there's someone else connected to her who probably named this and did this, yes. And then it was like brief surface stuff about a lot of people in spirit for the one person standing in front of him. So British mediums in particular talk about bringing the person back to life. I didn't feel like that was happening last night. It was more details, checklist details about them that you could not Google. It wasn't that kind of details. Specific details about them and often some kind of name, which is always people like that, and then often a message from them. It was still good, even without the depth of reading that you would get even in a practice circle or from a one-on reading that I give or that every medium I know would give. But I have to say this, to qualify this, there wasn't really time to go in depth because there were so many people saying no, 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 no. And he's like a bulldog. He will not let go. And he kept saying yes, yes, yes. And he wouldn't, and especially, and I've had that feeling where they just won't drop it or they keep coming back to something. So in a practice circle or even with a client, they can get back to you later, but it's such a large group and he is John Edward that getting back later isn't really an option. So he would just stick with them until he finally got to what it was they were saying no to, that in fact, every single time it turned out to be yes. So not time. So that was really good for me to watch. It was a great experience for me as a medium because I'm probably doing a dem in a theater, a public dem in a theater in September. I'll let you know about that as the date comes closer. And so seeing that, I thought, oh, this is going to happen to me. People are going to do the no, no, no thing because they want one person and that's not who I'm getting. So it was... It's different. Next week, I'm going to talk about how I should have clued in decades earlier that I'm a medium. I'm going to talk about stuff that was happening all my life that I didn't realize was mediumship that now is like, oh my God, that's so obvious now, but it wasn't obvious while it was happening in the years before I discovered this world of mediumship. So as always, thank you for watching this time. Like this video, comment on it below, click the subscribe button. That helps people see these things. And until then, see you next week. Thanks.